Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritta Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiriye. Nasta Prayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevayam Bhagavate Utama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Hare Krishna, devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. Beg all the blessings of the assembled Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis that we can have a nice discussion today on this most glorious Srimad Bhagavatam, the ripened fruit of all Vedic knowledge. So today I've been asked to discuss Canto 4, Chapter 24, verse number 29. And the title of the chapter is Chanting the Song Sung by Lord Shiva. Text 29. Swadharma nishta shatajanma bihi puman virinchatam tata param himam avyakritam bhagavato ata vaishnavam padam yataham vibuddha kalatyaye. Swadharma nishta, one who is situated in his own dharma or occupation. Shata janmabhi, for 100 births. Puman, a living entity. Virinchata, the post of Lord Brahma. Iti, gets. Tataha, thereafter. Param, above. He, certainly. Mam, attains me. Avyakritam, without deviation. Bhagavata, unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Atha, therefore. Vaishnavam, a pure devotee of the Lord. Padam, post. Yata, as. Aham, I. Vubuddha, demigods. Kala atyaye, after the annihilation of the material world. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. A person who executes his occupational duty properly for 100 births becomes qualified to occupy the post of Brahma. And if he becomes more qualified, he can approach Lord Shiva. A person who is directly surrendered to Lord Krishna or Vishnu in unalloyed devotional service is immediately promoted to the spiritual planets. Lord Shiva and other demigods attain these planets after the destruction of this material world. Purport. This verse gives an idea of the highest perfection of the evolutionary process, as described by the Vaishnava poet Jayadev Goswami, Pralaya Prayodi Jale Dirtavan Asivadam. Let us begin tracing the evolutionary process from the point of devastation, Pralaya. When the whole universe is filled with water, at that time there are many fishes and other aquatics, and from these aquatics evolve creepers, trees, etc. From these insects, reptiles evolve, and from birds, beasts, and then human beings, and finally civilized human beings. Now the civilized human being is at a junction where he can make further evolutionary progress in spiritual life. Here it is stated, Swadharma Nishtaha, that when a living entity comes to a civilized form of life, there must be Swadharma, social divisions according to one's work and qualification. This is indicated in Bhagavad Gita 4.13, Chaturvarnya Mayashtrastam Guna Karma Vibhagasa. According to the three modes of material nature and the work ascribed to them, 4 divisions of human society were created by me. In civilized human society, there must be divisions of Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra, and everyone must properly execute his occupational duties in accordance with his division. Here it is described Swadharma Nishta, that it does not matter whether one is a Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra. If one sticks to his position and properly executes his particular duty, he is considered a civilized human being. Otherwise, he is no better than an animal. It is also mentioned herein that whoever executes his occupational duty, swadharma, for 100 births, for instance, if a Brahmana continues to act as a Brahmana, becomes eligible for promotion to Brahmalok, the planet where Lord Brahma lives. There is also a planet called Shivalok or Sadashivlok, which is situated in a marginal position between the spiritual and material worlds. If, after being situated in Brahmalok, one becomes more qualified, he is promoted to Sadashivlok. Similarly, when one becomes even more qualified, he can attain the Vaikuntha Lokas. The Vaikuntha Lokas are targets for everyone, even the demigods, and they can be attained by a devotee who has no desire for material benefit. As indicated in Bhagavad Gita 8:16, one does not escape material miseries even if he is elevated to Brahma Loka. Abrahma Bhuvana Loka Punar Avartino Arjuna. Similarly, one is not safe even if he is promoted to Shivalok, because the planet of Shivalok is marginal. However, if one attains Vaikuntha Lok, he attains the highest perfection of life and the end of the evolutionary process. Mam upetya tukantaya punarjanmana vidyate. In other words, it is confirmed herein that a person in human society who has developed consciousness must take to Krishna consciousness in order to be promoted to Vaikuntha Lok or Krishna Lok immediately after leaving the body. Tyaktva deham punarjanma naiti mam iti sorjana. A devotee who is fully in Krishna consciousness, who is not attracted by any other loka or planet, including Brahma Lok and Shiva Lok, is immediately transferred to Krishna Lok, Mam Eti. This is the highest perfection of life and the perfection of the evolutionary process. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuru Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamstra Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Rindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Trubhyascha Kupa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavari Paschata Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, everyone. So just we'll read the verse again. This is again Canto 4, Chapter 24, Text 29. A person who executes his occupational duty properly for 100 births becomes qualified to occupy the post of Brahma. And if he becomes more qualified, then he can approach Lord Shiva. And a person who is directly surrendered to Lord Krishna or Vishnu in unalloyed devotional service is immediately promoted to the spiritual planets. Lord Shiva and other demigods attain these planets after the destruction of this material world. So another, very nice verse being presented here, and this is Lord Shiva speaking to the Prachetas. So another wonderful set of instructions in the pastimes of the Prachetas. We see by their great piety on their way to perform austerity under the instruction of their father, the great king Prachinibari. They met Lord Shiva, and we saw earlier that why did they get to meet Lord Shiva? Because the Prachetas had pleased him very much. And we can see, what did they do to please Lord Shiva? It was that they were surrendered to the order of their father. Thus, they were considered very pious. And on top of that, and maybe more importantly, they were surrendered to Krishna. And this surrender to the Supreme Lord is what pleased Lord Shiva very much. And so much so that he personally came to see them. Um, and we hear from Vidura earlier that it is very rare for someone to see Lord Shiva. So how many, of Lord Shiva's worshippers have had the fortune to see Lord Shiva? Very few. But it was by the surrender to Krishna that the Prachetas were able to please Lord Shiva. So we see very important instruction for us of how to please the great Lord Shiva. It is by one's surrender to the Supreme Lord. And we just passed a celebration of Mahashivratri, in which we have an opportunity to please Lord Shiva. And we see by the actions of the Prachetas that the means to pleasing the great personality of Lord Shiva is by rendering devotional service to the Supreme Lord. And in the last verse, the 28th verse, Srila Prabhupada has written, an exquisite purport describing many features of this. So now we come to this 29th verse, and I thought we could discuss three topics today, somewhat in reverse order of how the purport is laid out, but just to give some context. So that we'll discuss first this human form of life and how it is at the apex of all species of life. As Srila Prabhupada says, we have come to a junction, a point in which a decision has to be made. So I'll discuss a little bit about that. We'll talk about the different destinations that are described herein, Brahma Lok, Shiva Lok, and ultimately Vaikuntha Lok, and see how one can reach these different destinations. And we'll read a little bit from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 8, about what Krishna speaks about these places, to give us some insight into where we should aspire or where we can aspire to reach. And finally, we'll talk about this very important topic, this Swadharma Nishta, doing one's prescribed duties as a means to live a civilized life. Srila Prabhupada says, unless one practices their Swadharma in a mood of Nishta, being very fixed, one is simply an animal life. There is no civilization unless this is present. So it's quite a strong statement. And so we're going to try to prove that by our own assessment of what we see around us and see how this is in fact the truth. So we'll discuss these three topics today and anything else that may come up through discussion after. So Prabhupada opens the purport by talking about this evolution of life forms, and we should be very, careful. And we know that this is certainly not the theory of evolution that Darwin had proposed, but in fact, it is the evolution of the soul through different life forms that is being referenced here. So the species of life are fixed according to Shastra, the 8.4 million species. But the soul transmigrates from the lower life forms to the higher life forms, and based on activities, potentially down again to the lower life forms. So it is the soul that is moving or evolving from species to species, but it is not one species creating another species of life. This is very clearly established in our Shastra. So the human form of life now, it sits at the apex, the top of this evolutionary cycle. Of the 8.4 million species of life, we know it is the highest. And Srila Prabhupada says at this point there is a junction, which means there is some option, some decision to move. And that opportunity that exists comes with a big responsibility. Because we are equipped with this higher intelligence in the human form of life, we have now the ability to either continue progressing up beyond the human form of life into the spiritual world, or we can risk falling back down this evolutionary chain of the different species of life. We can degrade. So Srila Prabhupada again calls it the junction. He says now the civilized human beings is at a junction where he can make further evolutionary progress in spiritual life. So this is the point we come to. And so the human life, we have really three choices. Either we can do vikarma, karma, or akarma. Right? These are our three options. And in Shri Upanishad, we see that in the third verse, this reference to Atmaha, the killer of the soul. It speaks that one in the human form of life has a choice either to live according to this Ishavasyan principle. This Ishavasyan principle speaks that one acknowledges that the Supreme Lord is the controller, the Ishavasya of everything. And thus one who lives in accordance to that achieves greatness, and one who does not uh, is performing or experiences atmaha, which is explained to be the killing of the soul. And as we know, it's not the killing of the soul, but it's killing or destroying the soul's opportunity to continue to progress forward, and thus putting the soul down back through the downward spiral of this evolutionary process. So as Prabhupada says, we can make further progress into spiritual life, but if one does not live this Ishavasya principle, then one kills that opportunity and risks falling down the evolutionary life. And Prabhupada speaks in that purport that this should be our greatest fear. Our greatest fear should be that we don't take advantage of this human form of life, this great opportunity we have, and risk falling back down this cycle of life. So this is present. So we said there are three options that we have to perform. We can work as we desire. We can do what we want in an unregulated way. That is our option. The result is very treacherous and very difficult. It leads one to the darkest regions of hell, as explained in Sri Upanishad and in many other places. So one acquires so many sinful reactions by trying to enjoy the senses in an unregulated manner. So this is one option, vikarma, and certainly the result is kriya. The other option is to work in a regulated way. It is still sense gratification, but to enjoy regulated sense enjoyment. This is by following the different Vedic principles, the karma kanda processes. One can enjoy materially while making progress towards liberation. And Prabhupada explains this in many places about how this is a very gradual process, but it is regulated sense enjoyment. So it's better than unregulated sense enjoyment. But we know this process itself also has great pitfalls and dangers. One may fall from that platform of regulated sense enjoyment and go back to this unregulated way. And also, it is a very slow and arduous process. In this verse, we see that it references that in unalloyed devotional service, one is immediately promoted to the higher planets. So there must be another process, because this regulated sense enjoyment is a very slow and gradual process. So that's the third option, which is akarma or bhakti. By the practice of unalloyed devotional service, working for Krishna's pleasure, surrendering one's own desires, one can make very, very rapid progress. So these are the three options we have, and we have to pick from one of them. And so how are we going to pick? Well, we're going to understand what is the pros and cons of each, right? What are the benefits, what I can achieve by each of them. So in this verse and in the purport, Prabhupada is explaining the different destinations one can reach. So by performing by doing one's swadharma, for 100 births, he says, one can reach the planet of Brahmaloka. So this is the benefit of practicing one's prescribed duties. We'll talk a little bit about Swadharma at the end in terms of what it is, but just understand by doing one's duties and doing it very consistently, nishta, for 100 births, one can achieve the great Brahmaloka. Now, just one kind of side note, in the verse itself, it talks about occupying the post of Brahma. So one, by qualification, can actually occupy the position of Brahma. Brahma is a post that is occupied by various jiva tattvas. And at some point, even Lord Vishnu himself, if there is not someone qualified to occupy the post, as we know, there is a Lord Brahma in every universe. And so there are many needs for Lord Brahma. And so it is a post, kind of like we have so much competition here in America for the post of president right now. There is a process to acquire this post of Brahma. And then Srila Prabhupada speaks in the purport about achieving Brahma Loka. And then he says, if one, after achieving Brahma Loka, continues to progress, becomes more qualified, then one can reach Shiva Loka. And Shiva Loka is a higher platform. But Srila Prabhupada describes it as marginal because it's sitting between the spiritual and material world. And then Prabhupada talks about, well, one can become more qualified and reach Vaikuntha Loka. And so what is the qualification required specifically? So in this verse, we see unalloyed devotional service, direct surrender to the Supreme Lord. By doing unalloyed devotional service, one can immediately reach Vaikuntha Loka. So it is surrender to Krishna. It is only by the process of pure devotional service that one can reach the spiritual world. And Krishna says this very specifically and directly in the 8th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. The 8th chapter is entitled Attaining the Supreme. And so he says in that 28th verse that, a person who accepts the path of devotional service is not bereft of the results derived from studying the Vedas, performing sacrifices, undergoing austerities, giving charities, or pursuing philosophical and fruitive activities. Simply by performing devotional service, he attains all of these. And at the end, he reaches the supreme eternal abode. So the point that's being made in that verse by Krishna is that one achieves the supreme eternal abode by this Ananya Bhakti, pure devotional service. And one achieves all that is accomplished by all other processes. So Bhakti is inclusive of everything else, but it also adds one more feature that is not available by any other process. And that is attaining the eternal abode. And he calls it the supreme eternal abode. So, for us, it is to decide, where to go. Where do we want to go? Brahma Loka, Shiva Loka, Vaikuntha Loka. And so how we make that decision, well, we have to understand and we ascertain what is available at each of those destinations. Right? It's kind of like on an airplane. You have to choose, again, setting aside price for a moment. Do I want to sit in an economy class seat? Even within economy class, do I want to sit in a window seat, aisle, exit row, all these choices? But if I come and see, oh, there's a business class seat. Oh, that's very nice, more leg room, wider seat. And I think, well, that's much better than this economy class. But if I go and see the first class seats, and I think, wow, this is the best. This has the most facilities and amenities. So by having knowledge of the whole, we can then make a good decision. So similarly, we should understand from Shastra what is the potential and the opportunity from all of these different places. And we have to go to Shastra because our telescopes, no matter how powerful they are, they will not let us see what is in Brahma Loka, what is in Shiva Loka, what is in Vaikuntha Loka. So we must approach Shastra. So in the Bhagavad Gita, in 8th chapter, Krishna says, attaining the supreme. That's a very indicative title, because in this chapter, Krishna is giving how to attain it and what is supreme. He is defining what is supreme, and then he describes how to attain it. And so in this chapter, and Prabhupada quotes from one of the verses, from verse 16, about these different planets and these different opportunities. So I thought I would read just a couple of verses to hear what does Krishna say about which is supreme and which is less, to get his absolute understanding or explanation. So he says in the 16th verse, from the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all are places of misery, wherein repeated birth and death take place. But one who attains my abode, O son of Kunti, never takes birth again. So Krishna is saying, and he's so compassionate to us, because just like that business class seat may seem very nice and very comfortable, but to one who doesn't know what lies beyond that, yeah, it seems like perfection. So one who has, less than complete knowledge may think achieving even Brahmaloka is the supreme, right? But Krishna, being so kind to us, saying no, from the highest to the lowest, they are all places of misery. So to be very kind to us and make sure that we don't become potentially allured by the relative niceness. Of course, Brahmaloka is far, far, far superior in quality of life to what we see in this material world, in this earthly planet. But relative to Vaikuntha Loka, it is but a place of misery, because there is birth and death. So Krishna goes on to explain, the duration of Brahma's life in the coming verses. And we may wonder why. Why is he talking about all of a sudden the life of Brahma and how long he lives? Because he wants us to know that even though it seems, because he has such a long life, he's eternal. Even Lord Brahma is a temporary position. And so there is also death, destruction, and end. So to not be tempted by some relatively long, feeling, Krishna is explaining that. So then in the 20th verse of this same chapter, now Krishna says, okay, let me offer the description of Vaikuntha. I've said, hey, the highest to lowest planet material world is a place of misery, death. Then he says in verse 20, yet there is another unmanifest nature, which is eternal and transcendental to this manifested and unmanifested matter. It is supreme and is never annihilated. When all in this world is annihilated, that part remains. Then in the next verse 21, that which the Vedantas describe as unmanifest and infallible, that which is known as the supreme destination, that place from which, having attained, one never returns, that is my supreme abode. So here Krishna is very clearly establishing that his supreme abode is the supreme destination. It is infallible, which means it's perfect. Perfect means there is nothing more one can attain, and thus it makes it supreme. So Krishna, being very, very kind to us, is giving us the comparative analysis of these different lokas, so then we can make our decision, because ultimately it's going to be up to us. What are we going to do? Vikarma, karma, or bhakti? And we know by doing our karma regulated way, one can make their way to these higher planets. But only by the practice of pure devotional service, one can reach the Vaikuntha Loka. So he's given us this. And actually in the 22nd verse, he says, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is greater than all, is attained above by unalloyed devotion. Although he is present in his abode, he is all-pervading, and everything is situated within him. So he says, how to get to this supreme abode? It is Ananya Bhakti, pure devotional service. So this is the opportunity we have in front of us. The spiritual world, Vaikuntha Loka, it can only be achieved when one has no other desire but to please Krishna. Not even the desire to go to the spiritual world or to be free from birth and death, but the only desire is to please Krishna. This is pure bhakti. And Prabhupada says in the verse that one that is free of material gain, that it makes one qualified to reach Vaikuntha Loka. So there's this process of pure devotional service that brings us to have the potential. And Prabhupada comments nicely to give us further confidence. We've heard now what Krishna has said about these different destinations, but now we see that Prabhupada says that even the demigods desire to go to the Vaikuntha Loka. So even those who are enjoying already in these higher planetary systems, they wish to go further and go beyond. So it gives us some indication of where we can set our goal. It is very, very clear. Okay. So now the final topic for today I wanted to discuss a little bit about is this Swadharma Nishta. So the idea of civilized society. What is civilized? Srila Prabhupada is saying that the only means to a civilized society is to follow one's swadharma with nishta, means fixed and constant. Right? He says otherwise he is no better than an animal. So it's quite a strong statement. Either you follow your swadharma, your varnashram dharma, or you are living an animal life. So our initial inclination may feel like, wow, that seems a little, maybe far-fetched or maybe exaggeration. But actually, if we analyze and see, as everything Srila Prabhupada says, it is perfectly accurate. If we look today, society is trying to define what is civilized. And what do we see in society today that reflects so-called civilization? Eating raw flesh with chopsticks on fancy china is civilized. Intoxicating in very fancy places is considered civilized. Having active sex life is considered civilized. Dressing in fur coats, so on and so on. How civilized are we today? That I need to lock the doors of my house and have an alarm system that's connected to the police, because we have such a civilized society that I have to be fearful that someone is going to come and take my possessions. How civilized we have society today that to simply board a flight, I have to prove so much that I'm not carrying something that is going to create harm to others on that plane. So civilized. We have such a civilized society that now you have to buy water. You have to pay money for water. So civilized that our civilization allows us to kill the babies in the womb of a mother. So we see that there is no performance of swadharma for the most part. And this is the type of civilization we see. And what we see is that the situation is getting worse. As we so-called progress in technology and modern advancement, we see the civilization, the quality is actually getting worse. More drug abuse, more heinous crimes, more sinful activities. Forget about spiritually, just about social moral codes. We see such degradation. So clearly, the lack of following this varnashram dharma, this swadharma, is creating this animal-like propensities, even worse than animal-like in many ways. This human society is degrading in such a way. So when Srila Prabhupada says that it takes swadharma to be able to create civilization, actually we can see that. It is really nice. So real civilized life means to avoid the animal propensities of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, and to live in a nice way. So the civilized activity, it is enjoined in Shastra. It only comes from Shastra. It is not based on our own whims or our own thoughts. And Krishna has established the perfect system to create a civilized society. And this is this Varnashram system, this Chaturvarnyam Maya Shastra. This Varnashram system Krishna has established as a means to create a peaceful society where there are good relationships amongst all living entities, among the different humans as well as all the different living entities. And by creating a very peaceful and civilized society through this varnashram system, then one can have peace and the opportunity to pursue the higher and ultimate purposes of life, which is awakening our relationship with Krishna. So the varnashram system is a structure to create civilized society. It is not the end all and be all. It is the beginning point for which one can then practice devotional life. If one doesn't have to worry about their own existence and be fearful of who is going to attack them and where their chapatis are going to come from tomorrow and all these different things, then one can have a peaceful mind to pursue self-realization. So this varnashram system Krishna has established is to create a very wonderful environment to pursue bhakti, the ultimate purpose of life. As Srila Prabhupada said, this is the end of the evolutionary process. Right? So this Swadharma Nishta, this Swadharma, this is the prescribed duties. And Prabhupada explains in the Bhagavad Gita that one has two Swadharmas, or progressive. And this Swadharma means what is our specific duty or occupation. So in the conditioned state, our duty is based on our Varna and Ashram, based on the particular body that we've acquired, based on the interactions with the modes of material nature in prior lives. We assume a certain body and a certain set of qualities. And that leads to a specific duties and activities that we are to perform. And by doing those duties, one finds this, situated and peaceful state. And we are indirectly surrendering to this higher authority. Right? We are surrendering to this varnashram system that was established by Krishna. And when we all do that, we have a very peaceful coexistence amongst all of society. Now, Srila Prabhupada comments that when one comes to the liberated state or to the point of spiritual consciousness, one's swadharma transcends this material conception, this bodily conception, and one has a spiritual swadharma as directed by Krishna and our spiritual master. So our swadharma may be of a particular occupation based on the bodily concept. But as we come to devotional service, devotional life, then our swadharma comes to the point where we transcend that platform and come to work under the order of Krishna directly. As Krishna orders through the spiritual master, that becomes our directive. And that is the second aspect. So sometimes we have this confusion about what is my duty as I'm coming to devotional life, and how to understand my different ashrams. We can understand that ultimately one comes to become directly under the instruction of Krishna through their swadharma. So a critical term or aspect of doing one's performed duty is this aspect of nishta, to become fixed in our duty. To make progress in anything, one must be fixed. If you want to go to the gym, if you're fixed in going to the gym, then you'll achieve the fit body you desire. But if you're very loose, sometimes doing, sometimes not, then the result will not manifest. So here we see Swadharma Nishta. If one repeats for 100 births, then one can reach these higher planets. So in our devotional service, certainly based on the analysis we've hopefully heard today, our goal is to go to ultimately the spiritual world, and we know that is achieved by rendering pure devotional service. But we can try to become fixed in that service. We know in this path to Krishna Prema, one becomes naturally fixed, nishta, by becoming free of all our anarthas. When one is free of all the anarthas, then one becomes fixed. So in this pre-anartha nivritti stage, what to do? Well, we have to try to force ourselves to be fixed, because it's not happening naturally yet, because we have different impurities, different desires that are manipulating and disturbing the mind. And so we can create a sense of self-discipline to create this position of nishta before we reach it naturally. And so we don't let the mind decide, and we do this in our life. We don't let the mind decide whether we're going to go to the office or not. Oh, I don't want to go to work today, but we still go. Why? Because it's important. Right? We don't let the mind decide if we're going to pay our taxes coming up in a couple months. No, we know we have to pay our taxes. So why is it that we let the mind decide if we're going to get up early and chant our rounds? Of course, the mind is going to give so many excuses. You're tired, you went to sleep late, you've been working hard, this, that, and the other. But we don't let the mind decide in other important things in our life. So we become fixed by controlling that. So in devotional service, we can also uh, aspire to become nishta before it naturally occurs after anartha nivritti by taking control and not letting the mind decide, no, I'm getting up, or no, I'm going to the temple today to render service to the Lord. In this way, we can create this experience of nishta while we are in the process, and that will only accelerate our purification, accelerate us moving through anartha nivritti, where then we'll become naturally fixed in devotional life. So this consistency is very, very important. We see it emphasized in this verse, that one in consistency will be able to achieve these higher results. And consistency in devotional service is actually a great achievement. It is very difficult to be consistent in devotional service, but we can work to be nishta, to become fixed. And then one final comment I wanted to make on this swadharma. The structure of these prescribed duties, they're meant to establish ultimately our relationship with Krishna, to bring us to the point of self-realization. And in the process of working through self-realization, these prescribed duties also foster very good relationships amongst all. We know the Mahabhagavat, the Uttamadhikari, is very favorable to all living entities. But even in the materially established, varnashram system, it fosters good relationships amongst all, whether you are a Shudra or Brahmana. There is good cooperation. Krishna, Prabhupada gives the example of, the legs of the body work with the head in conjunction, and the arms and the torso representing the different varnas. Like that, there's good relationships. And so the aspect of relationship is very important in this varnashram system. And we can see in today how the lack of varnashram system, how the lack of us following this swadharma has created such degraded relationships. How degraded our relationships are. The most valued relationship now is with our dog. We say man's best friend is a dog. Why is that the case? Shastra doesn't enjoin this type of mixing. It certainly speaks about the need to protect and care for all living entities, including the animals, as we saw in Krishna's performance of even the Govardhan Puja, how he was reciprocating with all the life forms. But it doesn't create this or foster this idea of these deep relationships. But because there is lack of good relationships amongst the humans, amongst even family members, then one has no choice but to turn to these lower life forms to establish these relationships. And this is all a byproduct of not following this swadharma so nicely, this perfect system that Krishna has created. We see in families, parents are subjugated to living in senior citizen homes by themselves. They're lonely, so they must turn to pets. Siblings are engaged in so much quarrel, fighting over so many different things. And we don't even know our neighbors anymore. So these relationships have broken down because of the lack of this Swadharma system. So, we can analyze it from so many different perspectives to see that when Srila Prabhupada says that civilized life only occurs when one follows their Swadharma, it's actually fact. It is so true, because what we see around us today is the lack of following this, and the result is such a degraded quality of life around us. So anyways, that is the presentation for today. So the summary again is that we are at this junction in the human form of life, and we have a choice to make, and we should make an informed choice, knowing what the different options are. Whether I'm going to, do what I want in an unregulated way, pursue regulated sense gratification, or ultimately perform pure devotional service. And the results of those different activities were described herein, that one can, by regulated ways, reach some of the higher planetary systems. But Krishna is describing those as still a place of misery. But by the process of pure devotional service, one can reach the supreme eternal abode, which is pure and perfect. It is infallible, as described by the Supreme Lord himself. And it is achieved only when one surrenders to the Lord without any desire for motive. But when one does so, one can immediately reach. There is no long and arduous process. It is actually very quick and very immediate. And so we can be encouraged we want instant results. And finally, we talked about the importance of, the swadharma, these prescribed duties, and how it is the only means to leading a civilized life. And we can see that all around us very, very clearly. And as practicing devotees, our swadharma transcends our specific varnashrams duties to the duties enjoined by the Supreme Lord through the spiritual master for all of us. So just a little bit of discussion on this very beautiful verse of the 24th chapter of the 4th canto. So thank you very much. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki jai. Any comments, corrections, clarifications, or questions for today?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you so much for the wonderful class, as usual. Very nice instructions and points. I don't have any questions. I request all the devotees, if they have any questions or comments or realizations, they can go ahead. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dhanva more grace to Srila Prabhupada Guru Maharaj. A very beautiful lecture, Prabhuji. I have a question. Are there two kinds of swadharma, as I understand? That one is like when we are going according to the varnashram dharma, where we are to take up a particular occupation according to the skill set that we have. And if so, if that is also one of the swadharmas, how can one do that in this present day world when it's not according to the skill set? Most of us do not take up a profession according to the skill set that we have. So how to inculcate that, if that is one of the concepts of swadharma? And second one, as I understand, which you said, was when we come in this in the devotional service, so then what we are doing, that our swadharma then becomes following the instructions of the spiritual master. So if that is the case, so when we do that, then we do not have to do the occupational duty swadharma anymore. Then we can take up any profession. It's just that my question is that if we do so, many times when we see that we do not get satisfaction in the profession that we get. So
yeah,
if you can understand the question.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And just for context, this is explained in the purport to the 31st verse in the 2nd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, just if you want to reference it for a little bit further detail. But the swadharmas are not in parallel. They are sequential. So as long as one is on the conditioned state, one follows these prescribed duties by this varnashram system. And of course, as you said, in today's day and age, that is difficult to do. It is still possible. We do it somewhat indirectly anyways. We choose careers based on things that we feel we are, suited for and that fit our qualities. Some of us choose, careers that are, on the intellectual platform. Some of us choose careers that are more on the manual platform. And these have some, semblances of that. in ways, but it is you're right, in a very small way, and that was Srila Prabhupada's, one of his, you can say, in his mercy, his lamentation was that he did not, spend time to establish Varnashram Dharma. Of course, he was instructing his followers to make some progress in that endeavor. But that is the first. But when one comes to the process of devotional service, then their Swadharma becomes spiritual. So it goes from that level, from the Varnashram Dharma, to the spiritual level. And when one accepts the process of devotional service, accepts the spiritual master, one's specific duties, Swadharma means specific duties, become instructed by Krishna and Guru. So what to do, and that can be in different from what necessarily our particular varna or ashram might be from a material perspective. And when one comes to spiritual life, one should find satisfaction in pleasing the Krishna and the Guru. That is the point of devotional service. One surrenders their own desire for their sense gratification and says, no, I only want to work to please Krishna. Because by pleasing Krishna's senses, I achieve perfection. So when one has this vyavasaimika buddhi, this fixed intelligence in the order of the spiritual master, one follows that knowing it is very good. Even if we think, I don't enjoy this, one has great faith. No, this is actually best for me. So we take instruction on the specific duties to perform and what to do through the dictation of the Supreme Lord, through the Guru Parampara. So that's how the Swadharma transcends. And you may have heard of this term Daivi Varnashram, that the kind of the spiritualized feature of Varnashram Dharma. And one can perform in any sort of varna or any ashrama the perfection of pure devotional service. But so the what it is not in parallel, but they are as based on what position or state we are in. Is that okay?
Yeah, Prabhuji. Thank you so much, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dhanavad Pranam, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu, for the nice class and the description. Prabhuji, in the purport.
Yes.
Translation, Prabhu. So I have this question, Prabhu. It says there is also a planet called Shivaloka or Sadashivaloka, which is situated in a marginal position between the spiritual and material worlds. Right, Prabhu?
Yes.
So, Prabhuji, my understanding, as per when we see the Brahmanda poster, I was seeing above Brahmajyoti is the spiritual world is starting, and Kailash, right, Lord Sadashiva's abode.
Yeah.
So it's not marginal, right, Prabhu? It is the spiritual world, right, Prabhuji?
Well, it's marginal here because Srila Prabhupada is saying it's marginal. So that depiction, you see, it's hard to draw. Like if you look at a river, what is the river and what is land? That point where river turns to land, it is very difficult to depict. It is either one or the other, right? So in the presentation pictorially, we have to put it on one side or the other. But Prabhupada is explaining very directly here that it is marginal, and he says it twice. So we have to understand that Shivaloka is marginal. It is not fully spiritual and material. And we have some understanding of that from the position of Lord Shiva, right? And if you go and now get into very detail of Shambhu Tattva, we see that Krishna through Mahavishnu does not engage directly in the activities in the material world, and enjoins Shambhu Tattva to be the facilitator, the interactor with that material world. So he works through the agency. So there's a kind of that situation where Shambhu Tattva is actually directly engaging with the material world, but certainly has the connection from the spiritual world. So there's some connection there, but we must go by what Prabhupada is saying here very clearly, that it is marginal. It sits between the spiritual and material world. So
Okay, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu. So, Prabhu, one more question.
Yes.
So, in the purport, in the translation, it says, Lord Shiva and other demigods attained these planets after destruction of this material world. So we understand, Prabhu, like other demigods attain these planets is in the sense it's the spiritual planets, right, Prabhu? Here, Lord Shiva and other demigods attain these planets.
Yes.
The spiritual planet.
The Vaikuntha lokas. Now, again, it is ultimately based on their desire and their continued progress in devotional service. Because one cannot achieve Vaikuntha loka without coming to the platform of pure devotional service. So if the demigods are practicing pure devotional service, then they become eligible to enter the Vaikuntha lokas. But that is not necessarily always the case. And
so in case if they practice the right process, right?
Yeah, it has.
So my question here is, like we see Lord Shiva is a demigod and a guna avatar, right? So he doesn't need to attain to the spiritual world, right, Prabhuji?
He has his place, right? So he is continually performing that service. So yes, he does not reach the spiritual, the Vaikuntha loka, because he is internally engaged in the service of his beloved Lord in that activity of administering the material affairs through Durga Devi and Goddess Kali and his different sort of processes. So he is eternally engaged in that service for the Lord.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhu. Prabhu, one more question, Prabhu.
Yes.
So just a general question, Prabhu. This one, we hear in the 8th chapter that Adi Daivam is referred to demigods. But here we see Vibhu Daha is used to refer. Do you see any difference, Prabhu, between them?
I don't. I'm not a Sanskrit scholar, so I don't know the different. But we know there are often different terms for the same meaning. So I would ascertain that, but I don't know the specific technical nature of that. So.
Yeah, thank you very much, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for answering. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Dhanavad pranams.
Yeah, Prabhuji, if nobody has any question, I have one more question, Prabhuji.
Yes, Roger.
So, say if we follow our prescribed duty for 100 years, we go to Brahmaloka.
100 births.
One after. Okay. 100. Yeah, 100 births. So, and if we become more qualified, we go to Shiva Loka. So, what does that mean, Prabhu? More qualified means by in the sense of like, how do we quantify that, Prabhu?
Well, you can't put a number on it, but you can qualify it by the degree of surrender to Krishna. Even the progress, see, if we look at this whole, karma kanda process, right? It is a progressive state to ultimately surrender to Krishna. One is slowly surrendering to a higher authority, right? In order to satisfy my material desires, I have to give something up to someone else because I recognize I am not in full control of my own. And that's a progressive state, that one ultimately reaches to understanding surrender to Krishna. So the progress, the qualification is the degree of our surrender to the Supreme Lord. Actually, we are all surrendered to Krishna, either knowingly or unknowingly, because we have no independent existence. We have none. Either we acknowledge it or we don't. So the degree in which we are kind of intently surrendering to Krishna. That's the qualification, right? So as one moves from Brahmaloka to Shiva Loka, one is getting closer and closer to that complete self-realization, realizing I am part and parcel of Krishna, his eternal servant, and my only function is to serve Krishna. I was created for that reason, to be enjoyed by him. He is the Purusha, and I am the enjoyed, not the enjoyer. To the degree I understand that, I am making progress. To the degree I don't, I am falling down. So that is the qualification metric.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for summarizing the 8th chapter also, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Dhanavad pranamas.
So, Prabhuji, basically, one needs to keep it, this devotional life, everything very simple, right? We understand these basic principles, don't even need to go in so much deep detail in any other philosophies. What do you think, Prabhuji? I'm just...
Yeah. No, that should be our conclusion. It's so simple. Krishna says this is supreme abode. What do the great intelligent people do? Satatam kirtayanto mam. They're just chanting about him. Just chant and be happy. Everything will. But we need some of this knowledge to inspire our faith, to help build our nishta to be fixed. It's sometimes helpful, to understand. But yeah, we don't getting into the intricacies of what is my swadharma and how to do. Just follow the instructions of your spiritual master and Krishna, and everything will be perfect. And their instruction is chant, render service, read Prabhupada's books, associate, honor prasad. It's not so difficult, right? Sorry, it's not so complicated. But our mind and our material attachments makes it difficult. And that's why I spoke about, how to achieve nishta before we achieve it naturally. Don't think, oh, I can't be fixed until I'm free of anarthas. No, force ourselves to be fixed. We do it in all other aspects of life. We don't give options to go to work. We don't give options to study school. We don't let our kids give the options of whether they're going to study or not. We make them fixed so we can make ourselves fixed. And just simple. Chant, read, associate, and render service.
Sure, thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji, for the very nice points. Anybody have any more questions or comments, Prabhuji? Okay. Thank you once again, Prabhuji, for the wonderful class today. We are very grateful to you. Look forward to your more classes in the future, Prabhuji. If there are no more questions or comments for Prabhuji, I think we can end the call here. So let's pay our obeisances to all the Vaishnavas and Prabhuji. Vancha kalpatarubhyasya kripa sindhubhyasya patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Nandra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. His Grace Nitya Krishna Das Prabhuji ki jai. Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
This session is no longer being recorded.
Hare Krishna. Dhanavad pranamas. Yeah, because the camera's on the bottom, not the top. Yeah.